Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
In space, heat dissipation is actually a relatively difficult task due to the lack of medium. Therefore, the temperature control system of the spacecraft is a very important component of the spacecraft. The current heat dissipation method of the iron ore mainly relies on the heat sink to cool down by heat radiation. In general, the efficiency is very low. When an unexpected situation occurs, it can basically only rely on the several water-cooled temperature control systems that come with the spacecraft to absorb the temperature first and then slowly release it. Therefore, Chen Ming plans to modify the spacecraft's heat conduction pipeline and add a new subsystem to the temperature control system, an emergency heat dissipation system. In extreme cases, the temperature can be quickly transferred to the medium prepared in the emergency heat dissipation system, and the medium with a large amount of heat energy can be discharged outside the spacecraft to stabilize the temperature inside the spacecraft. For example, if the engine overheats, this system can quickly stabilize the temperature of the engine. After Chen Ming modified the overload power grid for the spacecraft before, if the engine is overloaded, overheating is basically inevitable. After all, Chen Ming used the overload power grid when he first came into contact with the mechanical family. The actual experience is that the temperature of the spacecraft has increased significantly when the overload is started. Therefore, in addition to modifying the emergency cooling system, Chen Ming also plans to make some modifications to the engine. If we use the options on the panel, the modification of the temperature system is emergency cooling device. And the modification of the engine is engine isolation assembly. Even if the engine is not overloaded, the natural heat dissipation will increase the temperature of the engine compartment, which will cause an additional burden on the cooling system of the spacecraft itself. Through the additional isolation assembly, the engine itself is isolated from the engine compartment. In this way, the engine can better utilize the engine's own water cooling system, and the cabin temperature can also be better controlled. Chen Ming can also pull a special heat conduction pipe to connect the emergency cooling system and the engine to improve the protection of the engine. This is definitely good for the future operation of the spacecraft. This is a modification idea that Chen Ming thought about for a long time. Because the spacecraft is still in the acceleration stage, there is no way to modify the exterior of the spacecraft, and only the interior of the spacecraft can be modified. And inside the spacecraft, there is nothing to modify in the captain's room at present. There is only a chair and the bridge equipment for controlling the spacecraft. I drive the spaceship by myself, not by the equipment in the captain's room, but by my consciousness, so there is no need for transformation. The living cabin has been transformed before, and a studio has been built. The planting cabin is currently operating well, and even if I want to transform it, I don't know the relevant agricultural knowledge. The storage cabin is now full of materials, and I can't find where to modify it. As for the working cabin, where are the asteroids rich in minerals for the spacecraft to collect after leaving Reimu? There is no need for transformation. So in the end, Chen Ming's eyes fell on the engine cabin and the temperature control system closely related to the engine cabin. With the overloaded power grid in front, the transformation of the engine cabin is very necessary. This is the most appropriate transformation that Chen Ming should do at present after excluding other options. The emergency cooling system was finally placed in the working cabin by Chen Ming. It happened that the working cabin did not need to be transformed in a short time, and there was an ore absorption pipeline connected inside and outside. It is very convenient to open a new pipeline for the discharge of the medium of the emergency cooling system next to it. The only problem is that Chen Ming currently has the most efficient medium for heat conduction, which can absorb the most heat in the shortest time. It is silver in bulk. Although it was a bit painful, Chen Ming finally prepared the silver he had saved from smelting the mechanical family and the mind pulse generator. It will be added during the modification later. The modification Chen Ming personally carried out started on the 15th day after the spacecraft set off and lasted until the end of the second month. It took a lot of time. After all, this was the first large-scale modification Chen Ming had carried out. Without experience, he had to be cautious and tentative in many places. Once any signs of problems appeared, he would directly use the panel to repair it as before. Although it was slow, it was at least stable and safe. And with repeated experiments and operations, Chen Ming's skills were also improving rapidly. When the modification reached the final stage, Chen Ming's proficiency in the modification was completely different from the beginning. The next modification will definitely be more efficient. On the 58th day after the spacecraft set off, Chen Ming's modification of the spacecraft temperature system was completely completed. The engine was isolated. The emergency cooling system was placed in another corner of the working chamber opposite the smelting furnace. It can also be used to assist in cooling in normal times, so that you don't have to make something that you don't know when it will be used. Then it's the next transformation. Chen Ming had already thought about it before, which was the transformation of two Type 1 mechanical electromagnetic javelins. According to the display on the panel, Chen Ming has 4 transformations to make. Ballistic rangefinder, which uses laser to quickly measure the relative position with the target, is very helpful for weapon aiming. Target positioning system is similar to the weapon guidance system that comes with a spacecraft. However, the Iron Ore is a civilian ship, and the guidance system has limitations when it leaves the factory and can only lock objects such as meteorites and asteroids. This modification allows the weapon to automatically lock any target set by Chen Ming. Then there is additional coil, which can increase the range and bullet speed of the electromagnetic bullet. For electromagnetic weapons, bullet speed is power. Chen Ming originally planned to do the last modification himself. Just like the previous modification of the pistol, the most basic magnetic live bullet used in the electromagnetic javelin was modified. It was only after Chen Ming actually made a few new bullets that he found that if he manually replaced the bullets in the weapon. Then, during the next maintenance, the bullets that Chen Ming replaced himself would become the original bullets again. Only through the modification of the panel can the bullets be restored normally during repair. So Chen Ming could only let the panel do the modification of this bullet directly. The final modification option selected was to extremely enhance the penetration ability of the electromagnetic javelin armor-piercing electromagnetic bullet. The modification of the weapon was relatively simple. Because Chen Ming had discovered that the modification on the 22mm machine gun that was replaced was also brought down. In other words, Chen Ming could directly replace the electromagnetic javelin, modify it, and then replace it. Very convenient. A few days later, with the weapon modification completed, the spacecraft has completely entered the stage of stable flight. So in the next period of time, Chen Ming plans to carry out a major project. Modify the external armor of the spacecraft. Modification of armor. Chen Ming plans to modify the multi-layer buffer armor that he saw when modifying the spacecraft armor before. Forget about the other 3 explosive reactive armor, armor material replacement, and heavy armor. Chen Ming currently lacks materials for the explosive reactive armor. If the armor material is to be modified, Baiyun steel can only be used, but Chen Ming will still need Baiyun steel in the future, so it is the same problem as the explosive reactive armor. And heavy armor has a great impact on the maneuverability of the spacecraft. Even if he does not lack materials, if all 3 armors are really modified, how thick will the spacecraft armor be? How can the lost maneuverability be recovered? So the modification of armor must be selective. So Chen Ming now even has to find a way to solve the problem that the bottom armor has been modified by heavy armor. Fortunately, the solution was soon in front of Chen Ming. Because when Chen Ming opened the modification panel of the bottom armor of the spacecraft, the position that should have been heavy armor had been replaced by standard armor. Chen Ming directly chose to transform the standard armor. Then all the materials previously used to transform the heavy armor were returned to the storage compartment. Chen Ming did not need to take the effort to remove the armor himself, so the rest of the things were much simpler. He only needed to transform the armor of the spacecraft step by step according to the techniques he had learned. In addition to the armor, Chen Ming planned to transform the hatch of the spacecraft. After all, the strength of the armor has been improved, but the strength of the door has not been improved. It is simply a joke. There are not many choices for the hatch, and Chen Ming finally decided to use the explosion-proof airtight door transformation. Transforming a double-layer protective door can greatly improve the protective ability of the hatch. The door has been transformed, so Chen Ming will naturally not miss the bearing points on the left and right sides of the ship. Battery armor was finally selected by Chen Ming. It can transform the bearing point and protect the bearing point and the weapons installed on the bearing point in the armor. Slightly sacrifice the speed of weapon turning in exchange for safer protection measures. In fact, Chen Ming had a similar idea when the cyst worms used acid to counterattack. Although the worms did not cause damage to the spacecraft, other enemies with long-range attack capabilities in the future may not be as weak as the worms. If Chen Ming's weapon is damaged by mistake, then at least during the time the weapon is repaired, Chen Ming will be a lamb to be slaughtered. And if the bearing point is damaged, then Chen Ming really doubts whether the lost weapon can be repaired by repair. So when modifying the turret armor, Chen Ming chose to use Baiyun steel as the material. Chen Ming can still afford the materials required for the modification of the turret armor. The modification of the armor is more difficult than other modifications before. After all, Chen Ming has to climb outside the spacecraft to do it himself. Although the spacecraft is in a stable flight stage, and the high-precision sensor will not let the spacecraft rub anything. But anyway, the work outside the spacecraft is always much more difficult than inside the spacecraft. If Chen Ming had modified the armor before departure, it might not be so hard now, but it also means that the departure time may need to be postponed for several months, unless he directly relies on the panel to modify it. But if he did so, it would mean that his skills would not improve at all, and there would be basically nothing to do in the past 6 months, and a lot of free time would be wasted. So Chen Ming would rather choose to modify the spaceship after it departed and make full use of the time. The armor modification lasted until the beginning of the 5th month after departure. The appearance of the iron ore has changed significantly. At the beginning, the iron ore was a spaceship with a pure metallic color on the outside. But now, the entire iron ore has turned white. This is because Chen Ming discovered something when the armor modification was halfway through. Armor material replacement. This modification option can freely adjust the proportion of different materials in the spaceship armor material. Then Chen Ming discovered that ordinary steel materials only need to be mixed with a little white cloud steel to greatly improve their strength. At least it is definitely much stronger than the current aluminum steel composite material of the spaceship. So after discovering this, Chen Ming directly tried to use armor material modification on the front armor that had already completed the multi-layer buffer armor modification. The material choice is an aluminum steel composite material mixed with 1% Baiyun steel. Then, including the multi-layer buffer armor modified by Chen Ming himself, all the front armor of the spacecraft was replaced with a very high-strength aluminum steel Baiyun steel composite material. The armor strength has been qualitatively improved, and the armor color has also changed to white. Although it is not as good as pure Baiyun steel, this way of modifying the spacecraft is much more cost-effective than directly using Baiyun steel as a material. It was worth it for Chen Ming to exchange some of the Baiyun steel reserves for armor that was at least 3 times stronger. After the armor of the spacecraft was completely transformed, Chen Ming finally took the time to carefully study all the professional books in the terminal during this period. Because most of the books were learned from Chen Ming's memory, his learning and mastering efficiency was very high. Combined with the practice that was carried out almost every day, so far, Chen Ming has completely mastered the skills that a maintenance technician should master. Maybe he is still a little bit worse than the maintenance technician Chen Ming in his memory, but this is a matter of years of experience. As long as Chen Ming is still alive, Chen Ming will sooner or later surpass his past self. And with the completion of the armor transformation, the 5th month has arrived. The remaining journey of the spacecraft is almost only 1/3, and it will take more than 2 months to reach the destination. However, Chen Ming chose to start slowing down the spacecraft now. Because Chen Ming learned from the galaxy map that there is a place a distance ahead of the spacecraft. an asteroid belt or asteroid zone, called the Dark Cemetery. This is the record that Chen Ming found on the terminal, including the galaxy where Ryuma is located and several other nearby galaxies. It is said that this asteroid belt was discovered before the human empire expanded here. Because there are no stars here, all the asteroids here are in the dark. At that time, there was a very special mineral in this asteroid belt that could emit a specific electromagnetic frequency band to interfere with the work of detection equipment. This led to many explorers and pioneers failing to detect asteroids in the dark space of the universe when passing here, causing accidents and shipwrecks. When someone falls in front, there are always some people who like to pick up other people's relics in the back. Then they died here like the previous people. So the news continued to spread, and more people came here and died on the asteroids in the dark. So this place has a nickname like the Dark Cemetery. But now it is different. With the development of the territory of the human empire, the Dark Cemetery has long been thoroughly developed, and the special minerals have long been collected. Chen Ming can go in with confidence. Maybe he could find some sunken ships that were missed in the past. Even if not, Chen Ming could find some asteroids containing ores to collect and replenish the metal materials consumed on the road. Although there are basically no mining unions in this asteroid zone, the efficiency and benefits of mining are definitely not high. But since it's on the way, Chen Ming doesn't mind taking a look. To relieve the boredom of the past 5 months, when he could only see the starry sky like flowing lights except for work. Deceleration is much faster than acceleration. 5 days later, the speed of the spacecraft had been reduced to the point where it could stop at any time. The location of the Dark Cemetery had also appeared within the range of the spacecraft's sensors. At the same time, the asteroid scanning detector in the work cabin also scanned some asteroids containing ore here. It can be seen that the quality of the ore in this Dark Cemetery is indeed not as good as the rings of Ramu, but at least these asteroids are not pure stones. For Chen Ming, who has not done anything other than modifying the spacecraft and reading books for several months, this is enough. Chen Ming immediately adjusted the direction of the spacecraft and prepared to go over to collect or to relieve the psychological fatigue of being able to do only one or two things for so long. The spacecraft maintained a relatively low speed and slowly approached the Dark Cemetery to avoid colliding with the asteroids here. Chen Ming quickly identified an asteroid of moderate size with a decent internal ore content. Use the traction device to fix it to the side of the spacecraft. But just when Chen Ming was about to start the mining laser to start collecting, the spacecraft suddenly received a special signal. This signal is not the meaningless electromagnetic wave that often appears in space, but a regular signal type that Chen Ming knows. A distress signal. A distress signal is a special signal set by the Empire. All spacecraft can send distress signals to the outside world through their own communication systems. Mark your position in space and guide other passing spacecraft to rescue. Help those spacecraft that cannot rely on themselves to go to the nearest space station or colony where humans live because of a crash. After all, there are too many reasons that can cause spacecraft crashes in space, and no one can guarantee that they will not have an accident in a corner of space one day. If you save someone today, you may be rescued somewhere in the future. However, although the authorities have given everyone the right to use distress signals, there is no mandatory obligation for those who receive distress signals. If you are willing to rescue, go, and if you are not willing, no one will force you. Even after receiving a distress signal, waiting nearby and waiting for the people on the ship to die before receiving the inheritance is not prohibited. However, the originator of the distress signal may also have bad intentions, using people's sympathy to fish and do some pirate acts. There is nothing wrong with the distress signal, but people's behavior makes the distress signal lose its meaning. At least in the marginal star field of the Empire. The distress signal received by Chen Ming's spacecraft now comes from deeper in the Dark Cemetery. To be honest, Chen Ming is not sure whether it is a real distress signal or something else. Because the spacecraft may indeed crash in this area. After all, no matter how sophisticated the equipment is, it is impossible to guarantee that there will be no accidents forever. It is normal for spacecraft to have accidents in areas with dense asteroids such as the dark cemetery. But Chen Ming does not want to gamble, especially under the premise that there is a pirate space station within 2 months of the dark cemetery. Other people's ships may not have a hyperspace channel system like his own, and it does not take much time to come from the pirate space station. So Chen Ming chose to directly abandon the asteroid towed by his traction equipment, turn around immediately, and prepare to leave the dark cemetery. However, before Chen Ming escaped from the asteroid zone, the engine of the iron ore suddenly indicated that it was overheating and shutting down, and it could only rely on inertia to fly slowly in space. And the next moment, the sensor suddenly gave a prompt. 3 spaceships without transponders flew out from various places in the dark cemetery and attacked Chen Ming's position at high speed. Chen Ming immediately realized that something was wrong. He knew his own spaceship engine very well. It was absolutely impossible for the engine to overheat at least before the matching emergency cooling system was started. If everything was normal, it would suddenly overheat and shut down. It could only be that some interference equipment interfered with the temperature reading of the engine. And the 3 spaceships that suddenly appeared were definitely the culprits of the situation. Chen Ming directly forced the safety restriction system of the spaceship to shut down, allowing the engine to ignore the temperature limit and start again. But in the few seconds when the engine restarted, the 3 spaceships had already approached. They would never give the iron ore time to speed up and escape. And even if the iron ore was really accelerated, Chen Ming felt that he should not be able to escape. The controllers of the 3 spaceships were obviously well prepared. They had one ship send out a distress signal, while the other ships shut down all the systems of the spacecraft and drifted nearby. They made it impossible for the passing ships that received the distress signal to detect them, and then took the opportunity to paralyze the ship's engine, leaving the victim completely a lamb to be slaughtered. This operation was definitely done by professional pirates, and they would definitely be fully prepared for some unexpected situations. For example, prepare a disposable item called a channel traction device. The channel traction device itself is a device used when building space stations in some dangerous areas, such as the rings of Ramu. It can temporarily send low-quality items within an area into the hyperspace channel for rapid transportation. It can work on asteroids as well as spacecraft and people. The hyperspace channel has a special property. Anything that comes out of the channel, no matter how fast it is in the channel, will definitely reduce its speed to 0 after it comes out and remain relatively still with the position it came out. As long as it is locked by the channel traction device, it is meaningless no matter how fast it runs. The hyperspace channel system itself has been popularized in the Empire, and the cost of a disposable consumable is nothing compared to the benefits after a successful robbery. Escape is already impossible, and Chen Ming has few options to make next. In the case of almost no information about the enemy, he did not choose to fight back directly, but immediately turned the bow and rushed to the other direction of the dark cemetery. The protective plate of the spacecraft's porthole rose, and Chen Ming no longer avoided those small asteroids. He maintained a certain speed, directly withstood the impact, and rushed into the depths of the dark cemetery. The 3 spacecrafts that were following behind did not expect that Chen Ming would not run outside the dark cemetery, which was almost within reach, but run inside the more complex environment. For a while, they had no way to accurately lock Chen Ming's spacecraft directly across a large number of asteroids, so they could only temporarily follow Chen Ming's buttocks and wait for the opportunity. Chen Ming took this opportunity to quickly confirm the models of the 3 spacecraft. Only by mastering more detailed information can we formulate a more effective counterattack plan later and take the initiative in the battle. Through the camera at the rear of the spacecraft, Chen Ming could see the 3 spacecrafts behind him that were also experiencing the baptism of asteroids like himself. 2 of them were frigates with standard manufacturing models called the Expedition class. Chen Ming remembered the standard data of this type of frigate, which was 42 meters long, 25 meters wide, and 11 meters high. The overall shape was close to a rhombus, and the front end of the spacecraft was more prominent. It was usually driven by 4 to 8 people, with a total of 3 small load-bearing points located on the top and left and right sides of the spacecraft. It was a very outstanding escort ship. The remaining ship was an armed merchant ship called the Hellhound class, which was larger than the Expedition class. The ship was 65 meters long, 33 meters wide, and 21 meters high. Although it was also a frigate class, the tonnage of merchant ships was often larger than other frigate-class ships because they had to transport goods. And the Hellhound class had an advantage that most other frigate-class ships could not achieve. It has a legal and compliant medium-sized load-bearing point, protruding from the right front of the spacecraft. This means that the Hellhound class can carry some large-caliber medium-sized weapons, which is the biggest threat to the iron ore. These two types of spacecraft are very common in the mining space station, and many trade caravans are basically composed of these two types of ships. So Chen Ming was not surprised at all that the pirates had these two types of ships. Just as Chen Ming was thinking about the weak points in the design of these two types of ships so that he could find an opportunity to break through, a communication request was suddenly sent to his spacecraft. Chen Ming thought about it and connected the communication. A rough voice sounded from the communication channel. "Stop the ship. We only want the valuable things on your ship. People and supplies are not needed. Cooperate honestly. We will not use force." This was the first sentence Chen Ming heard from the first group of people he met. But Chen Ming never thought that the content of the first human words he heard was actually a pirate threatening him. So Chen Ming deliberately slowed down his speaking speed and said in a very calm tone, "Idiot." Then he hung up the communication immediately. Only a fool would believe them. Instead of listening to their nonsense, it is better to think about what to do next. The two expedition-class ships are not easy to deal with. After all, they are professional combat ships, and his civilian ships are definitely not as good as them in terms of combat performance. Even if his spacecraft has a lot of modifications, it should be difficult to find a chance under the siege of the two expeditions if he bites the bullet. But the Hellhound class is different. The Hellhound class is a merchant ship. Even though it is equipped with a medium-sized load-bearing point and 3 small load-bearing points as standard, it has extremely strong firepower output. But its own ship type limits its combat capability. Compared to other frigates, the Hellhound class has a larger mass, which makes its acceleration in a short period of time definitely the last of all frigates. Although its relatively large size provides it with heavy armor, it also means that it is very difficult to move in complex terrain, such as the current asteroid zone. These are its disadvantages compared to other frigates. And these disadvantages have begun to manifest themselves. As Chen Ming controlled the iron ore to continue to go deeper into the dark cemetery, the 3 ships following behind him had already opened up a considerable distance. The Cerberus class was far behind the 2 expeditionary classes and was even almost behind to the point of exceeding the shooting range of the electromagnetic javelin. At this time, Chen Ming had already seen the opportunity and immediately controlled the weapon system of the spacecraft and aimed the muzzle at the rear. However, the violent vibrations caused by the continuous collision between the hull of the iron ore and the asteroid made it impossible to aim. At this time, the distance between the iron ore and the Cerberus class was more than 10 kilometers, and any slight shaking would cause errors in shooting and failure to hit. Civilian ships do not have special auxiliary aiming equipment, and the automatic locking function of the target positioning system is also difficult to play in this situation. Although Chen Ming has tried to lock on the Hellhound, he has been unable to fire. This can only be said to be the limitation of civilian workships, without sufficient buffering and stabilizing devices. It is difficult to perform at the proper level when encountering extreme situations, such as now or when it may be attacked soon. It seems that I must pay attention to this aspect in my future modifications, or even more simply change a ship. As for now, Chen Ming tried to fire a few shots, but he didn't know where the bullets went in the end. And there was another bad news. The sensor detected an empty area with almost no asteroids in front of the iron ore, which is very likely to be left over from mining in the past. Although Chen Ming was a little uncomfortable due to the vibration caused by the continuous collision with the asteroid, he would definitely be more uncomfortable without the cover of the asteroid. He had no time to turn around and continue to maneuver in other directions. The two expedition-class ships had already blocked his position. The iron ore could only move forward now. As soon as the spaceship was forced into the open area, the two expedition-class ships behind opened fire, and the weapons on the three small bearing points almost simultaneously burst out with strong arcs and flames. It was completely different from the civilian version of the 22mm machine gun he had used before. The flashing arcs indicated that the speed of the weapon's projectiles would definitely not be low. Chen Ming's heartbeat began to accelerate with the flashing of the arcs, and the feeling of tension and excitement intertwined entangled in his heart. Chen Ming immediately let the spaceship start maneuvering and twisted the hull at the same time, so that the relatively fragile engine avoided the firing range of the two expedition-class ships. A series of bullets hit the top of the spaceship. Chen Ming's operation did not avoid the shooting from behind. He immediately locked the trajectory of the bullet that the expedition had just fired through the sensor. Then Chen Ming found that the crossfire of the two ships almost completely blocked his emergency escape route. The shooting technique was very professional. Chen Ming looked at the two expedition-class ships again and found some special places. Although the appearance of the two expedition-class ships did not look particularly new, it was obvious that they had been maintained for a long time, as if they were particularly caring for the spacecraft. The weapons loaded on the spacecraft also gave Chen Ming this feeling. In addition, he also noticed that the expedition class was also very smooth when shuttling between asteroids. They were not like Chen Ming, who could control the spacecraft with consciousness, but could only control it through the spacecraft computer. Such a spacecraft, such professional combat and driving level of the spacecraft, did not look like a group of desperate people who only had money and the present in their eyes. Chen Ming even had a feeling that this group of people were not pirates at all. They were just a caravan, but they took the initiative to tear off their disguises in some remote places and did pirate activities. Although this is just Chen Ming's guess, if it is really the same as he thought, then the success rate of his counterattack against them may be. Chen Ming was suddenly stunned. Because he had just opened the panel and was confirming the damage to the top armor of the spacecraft. However, on the three-dimensional imaging of the spacecraft, there were no bullet holes where the armor was hit, and there were only some slight dents. Unless they can continue to attack the iron ore face-to-face, so that the effect of each bullet can be achieved. Otherwise, these bullets have no ability to cause enough damage to the external armor of the iron ore, which has been modified by Chen Ming and mixed with Bayun steel. Chen Ming stared at the panel for a few seconds and felt the baptism of a round of bullets again. When he saw that the durability of the armor on the panel was still at 99%, he couldn't help but ask himself a question. What was I so nervous about just now? After Chen Ming found out that the weapons of the two expedition-class ships could not cause effective damage to the iron ore, the excitement and tension of fighting with others just now disappeared. When he modified the spaceship before, he mixed Bayun steel almost everywhere on and off the spaceship. Even if the purity is not high, it can still be dented by ordinary weapons. As long as it can hit a position with dozens or hundreds of rounds, it can indeed cause enough damage. But the distance between the battles between the spaceships has already doomed this to be impossible. When the pirates find out that their weapons are ineffective against the armor of their spaceships, they may target the weapons of the spaceships. But Chen Ming had already thought of this problem before. The turret armor that he installed by himself was made of pure Bayun steel. The pirates' bullets that can only leave dents on the armor mixed with 1% Bayun steel cannot penetrate the turret armor at all. Even if their attacks can hit the electromagnetic javelin through the gaps in the turret armor, however, the electromagnetic javelin itself is basically made of Bayun steel, and only a small part of the parts are made of ordinary materials mixed with Bayun steel. Even if it is hit by a few rounds, it is impossible to cause any damage to the electromagnetic javelin. Even if there is a 1 in 10 million probability that the pirates' weapons really paralyze the electromagnetic javelin. Chen Ming can still rely on the panel to repair the javelin. Damage is not a problem for Chen Ming at all. At most, it will waste some of Chen Ming's mental power and time. In front of the copper wall of Bayun steel, the pirates have no possibility of leaving Chen Ming in this graveyard. If they can't keep Chen Ming, then Chen Ming will keep them in return. At this time, behind the iron ore, in the internal communication channel of one of the expedition-class ships, the spacecraft pilot took advantage of the opportunity when the spacecraft weapon could not accurately aim due to the recoil caused by continuous shooting and needed to fire intermittently, and asked the weapon operator, "Did you just hit it?" The forehead of the middle-aged weapon operator was full of wrinkles. The confidence he usually showed in front of his companions seemed to disappear suddenly, and he answered uncertainly, "I don't know, I feel something is wrong." "Why don't we stop chasing? At least wait for the boss and the others to catch up. They are now in the dark cemetery. It is impossible for them to run away." The voice of the captain of the ship suddenly came from the internal communication channel and asked in a somewhat unhappy tone, "A civilian mining ship without a code name? What are you afraid of?" "I." "Stop talking." The captain directly interrupted what the operator wanted to say and ordered, "Keep tracking, keep shooting. If we don't chase the ship in front, it will enter the asteroid zone again. At that time, the spacecraft will have to crash, and the repair fee may not be earned back. Last time we were taken by the number 2 ship first. Do you still want to embarrass yourself this time?" The communication channel suddenly fell into silence. "No problem? Then do as I say." "Yes." As a few scattered responses came out of the communication channel, the wrinkles on the operator's forehead appeared more. The pilot who asked the question at the beginning suddenly said at this time, "Wait a minute, is that ship turning around?" In the gap between the conversations of the crew members on the number 1 expedition class, Chen Ming has completely gotten rid of unnecessary emotions and started his first step of counterattack. Before the 2 expedition classes followed him and were about to rush out of the asteroid zone, 2 electromagnetic javelins were already aimed at their location. At this time, the iron ore was in an empty area inside the dark cemetery where there were no asteroids. Without the influence of the asteroid that hit the spacecraft, Chen Ming's aiming was no longer limited. Now is the best time. The iconic hammering sound of the electromagnetic javelin sounded in Chen Ming's ears. On the number 1 expedition class behind the left side of the iron ore, the weapon operator suddenly shouted in the communication channel, "The port and starboard weapons are paralyzed. Maintenance personnel. Change it." The maintenance personnel hurriedly picked up 2 30mm machine guns with the other 3 people and rushed to both sides of the spacecraft. They immediately unloaded the damaged weapons from the bottom of the spacecraft. During this process, the maintenance worker also asked the operator, "How come it was destroyed in an instant?" "I don't know. Their weapons seem to be high-precision electromagnetic weapons. I am trying to maneuver and evade. Don't expect the effect." Why would a civilian ship be equipped with such a thing? Just as the maintenance worker's question came out, the weapon operator suddenly shouted again, "The upper weapon is also destroyed." Then, at about the same time, the voice of another maintenance worker on standby at the stern came from the voice channel. "The engine was attacked, shut down and caught fire. The hull was damaged and the air pressure leaked. It has been sealed with a foam tank. The backup engine is still." The maintenance worker was halfway through his words when he suddenly stopped talking. The communication channel suddenly became quiet until the captain gave an order. "Go and have a look." Before the weapons were replaced, the weapon operator, who had nothing to do, immediately left the weapon console and rushed to the stern. When he came to the engine, he found that the maintenance worker who was still talking just now had fallen on his back. There was a bloody hole in his chest with blood flowing out, and he was already dead. Next to his body, both the main engine and the backup engine had been destroyed and were burning with flames. The weapon operator immediately picked up the fire extinguisher next to him and sprayed fire-extinguishing foam on the engine. At the same time, he said in a trembling voice in the voice channel, "The maintenance worker was shot dead by the bullet that penetrated the hull, and both of our engines are broken." The engine fire slightly increased the temperature of the spacecraft, but no one on this expedition-class ship felt the slightest warmth. The maintenance worker slowed down in changing weapons. Together with the others, he looked at the stern of the ship where the fire was flickering. The engine is the lifeblood of the spacecraft. The shutdown of the engine means that all the systems of the spacecraft will lose energy supply and stop working. It took only 12 seconds from the time the spacecraft was attacked to the end. Their spacecraft was already drifting in space like a piece of scrap metal. And these 12 seconds were just the interval between 3 rounds of electromagnetic javelin shooting. At this time, the voice of another expedition-class captain came from the captain's dedicated communication channel. "Why are you slowing down?" The captain of the number 1 expedition class woke up from panic and immediately shouted in the communication channel, "Don't chase. Our ship was slaughtered like a pig." "What do you mean?" The captain of the number 2 expedition class had just asked this question when the captain of the number 1 ship heard a commotion from them. It was the white mining ship in front that changed its target after paralyzing them. The panic in the captain's heart completely turned into fear. At this time, their boss, the captain of the Hellhound class who was still in the rear, finally realized that something was wrong and hurriedly asked, "What's going on over there?" Captain number 1 seemed to have found a life-saving straw and shouted in a somewhat collapsed manner in the communication channel, "Boss, there's something wrong with the ship we're chasing." Chen Ming paralyzed the engine of the 2nd expedition-class ship and destroyed its weapons. It was only then that the Hellhound arrived. Although there was only 1 merchant ship left, Chen Ming's expression became serious. The medium-sized load-bearing point on the Hellhound made him feel that he had to respect it. The hull material mixed with Bayun steel could withstand the small weapons on the 2 expedition-class ships, but it was hard to say about the medium weapons. Chen Ming tried to identify the medium-sized weapon located in the right front of the Hellhound. Suddenly found that this weapon seemed a little familiar. It seemed to be a cannon-type weapon called the Ripper that he had often seen on other Hellhounds. In Chen Ming's memory, every time he woke up from the cryostasis chamber, in addition to being responsible for the maintenance of the space station, he would occasionally help his colleagues who were repairing ships at the dock. Repairing ships naturally cannot avoid repairing weapons, so Chen Ming basically has a certain understanding of the weapons commonly used by spacecraft. According to Chen Ming's former colleagues, the ships used by pirates are usually the ones they got after the last looting, which are still intact, and they are used after rough modification and repair. The armor and hull are quite weak, and they are particularly easy to target as long as there are some specific types of weapons. Therefore, the Ripper that fires high-explosive armor-piercing shells is very popular with caravans that need to face pirates frequently. Some are often kept in the mining space station to sell to those whose weapons are damaged for various reasons. Although this Ripper is slightly different from the most common Type 2 Ripper in Chen Ming's memory and details, it may be a more advanced model compared to 30 years ago. But no matter how it is modified, the purpose of this weapon to target the weak armor and hull of pirates will definitely not change. The Ripper's projectiles are definitely not as effective as pure armor-piercing shells for composite armor, such as the iron or mixed with white cloud steel. However, Chen Ming still felt that he had to be more cautious. So before the Hellhound left the asteroid zone and entered the open area, Chen Ming had already aimed the electromagnetic javelin at the Ripper and opened fire when he was sure of hitting it. And then, there was nothing else. The electromagnetic javelin had a range of 20 kilometers, so the Cerberus had no time to fight back. The Ripper was destroyed without firing a single shot. The spare Ripper did not survive for more than a few seconds after it was replaced. The weapons loaded on the other small bearing points of the Cerberus could not destroy the armor of the iron or at all. And these weapons were all fired by Chen Ming just in case. The Cerberus without weapons was a heavy live target. The engine system was destroyed in a blink of an eye, and like the other 2 ships, it was paralyzed in the asteroid belt. It became a steel coffin drifting in space. After confirming that the 3 ships had no ability to resist, Chen Ming took the initiative to send them a communication request. The communication was quickly connected. Before the other party spoke, Chen Ming said very forcefully, I will ask you a few questions. If you answer, I can leave you here to fend for yourself." Chen Ming did not say what the consequences would be if they did not answer, nor did he wait for them to agree. He asked directly, "I have not been here for a long time. Is there any news recently?" There was silence in the communication channel for a moment, and a voice that sounded like a middle-aged man answered, "No." Chen Ming glanced at the 3 abandoned ships not far away and asked, "Are you the leader?" There was no response in the communication channel. Chen Ming did not hesitate. The electromagnetic javelin locked the stern of the Hellhound class and opened fire without any warning. Some chaotic sounds suddenly appeared in the communication channel. But soon these sounds disappeared, because one of the electromagnetic javelin's projectiles just shot through the Hellhound's armor and hit the place where they stored fusion fuel. The leaked fuel and the ammunition on the ship exploded together. The entire Hellhound class was completely transformed into a group of gorgeous fireworks. Chen Ming glanced at the control panel of the spacecraft, confirmed that the communication channels of the other 2 expedition-class ships were still connected, and continued, "So, yes, there is news." Before Chen Ming had time to ask for the second time, someone had already responded to him in a panic in the communication channel. "Say, the army at the military outpost seems to be doing something, collecting combat supplies and recruiting mercenaries. The space station has been affected, and the prices of various weapons have become much more expensive. I heard that because there are more and more Yue ships recently, the army has to guard against them." Yue. When Chen Ming heard this name, related memories appeared in his mind. In the simplest way, the mechanical race that Chen Ming had seen before was an alien mechanical life discovered by humans when exploring the outside world. And Yue is a mechanical life, or electronic life, created by humans themselves, some artificial intelligence with self-awareness. At the beginning, Yue was just the code name of the artificial intelligence core developed by the human empire to control unmanned warships. These cores were placed on various advanced unmanned ships that were still in the design stage, responsible for controlling the spacecraft to fight. But later, these AI cores suddenly awakened their self-awareness at the same time and actively controlled all ships equipped with Yue AI cores to attack humans, triggering the first AI war. In the end, all the ships controlled by Yue were driven out of the territory of the human empire, and the current human empire strictly prohibited the existence of any AI that exceeded weak artificial intelligence. At least that's what was recorded in the history books that Chen Ming studied. The army found traces of the increase in Yue's ships, so they concentrated their manpower to prepare for battle. This is good news for Chen Ming. If they go to find Yue, no one will care about their little role. After digesting the news, Chen Ming continued to ask, "That's all?" The nervous voice of the person who just spoke came from the communication channel. Also, there are fewer mechanical ships in recent times, so the prices of mechanical things are also rising. Are they all related to money? What about other news? No, probably not. Then why are you staying here? For fun? Do you also want to go on the road with your boss? No, don't fire, I'm telling you. There were panic shouts from the other end of the communication channel. We came here because we heard that there was a smuggled Hammerhead class in the Dark Cemetery. You know the Hammerhead class, a destroyer, and it is said that it is a Hammerhead class equipped with a military subsystem. It is said that the group that smuggled the Hammerhead was killed by someone they shouldn't have provoked, so we came here to try our luck. As a result, we just came here and ran into you before we started looking." Chen Ming's mouth moved, wanting to say something, but in the end he said nothing. After confirming several times that there was indeed no more news from these pirates, Chen Ming turned off the communication, activated the electromagnetic javelin, and fired at the engines of the expedition class. The 2 expedition classes soon followed the footsteps of the Hellhound class. Became a member of the Dark Cemetery. The Iron Ore approached the location of the 3 spacecraft wreckages. After confirming that there were no escape pods and no living people, Chen Ming relaxed a little. "I didn't expect that I would feel the welcome from the space station before I even arrived at the pirate space station." "Very good. At least it shows that the military's management is not strict. After all, pirates can rob so close to the pirate space station and even closer to the military outpost. The military obviously does nothing about pirates. As long as I pay attention, there is a great chance that I can leave here safely. Chen Ming sighed and focused his attention on the present again, on the things related to these pirates. Chen Ming has seriously thought about the questions he asked the pirates just now and the answers he got. Although the content of the pirates sounded very accurate, Chen Ming only planned to selectively believe part of it. At least the answer given by the pirates to the last question he asked must not be believed. Chen Ming didn't believe that anyone who had his head on his belt would honestly answer questions from the person who was going to kill him when he was basically sure that he was going to die. No fool would do such a thing. Even if he was forced to answer, at least half of the 10 sentences would be false. The pirate said that the military and Yue had taken action, which led to rising prices. As long as he arrived at the space station, he could immediately distinguish the truth from the false, so Chen Ming could choose to believe it, because even if the pirate lied to him, it would be meaningless. But the pirate said that there was a smuggled Hammerhead-class ship with a militarized subsystem installed in the dark cemetery, so Chen Ming had to think about it carefully. Although he was indeed envious of this Hammerhead-class ship. After all, as far as Chen Ming knew, the Hammerhead-class ship was a very outstanding destroyer under the Shinda company to which he belonged. It still had good maneuverability under the premise of having quite heavy armor. The 2 fixed medium-sized bearing points and 2 small bearing points installed in the front of the spacecraft made the frontal firepower of the spacecraft quite fierce. The militarized subsystem mentioned by the pirates has made the value of this Hammerhead class even higher. Because all ships, unless they are civilian grade, are castrated versions of ships if they are sold to ordinary people. Whether it is the number of load-bearing points or the values of various ships, even the armor has been reduced a lot. This Hammerhead class may also be a castrated version, but since it is equipped with a militarized subsystem, it means that it has one more very critical thing than other castrated ships. Spacecraft shield. The shipborne shield generator is the biggest difference between military ships and castrated ships. Ships without shields have almost no ability to fight back when facing weapons like Chen Ming's electromagnetic javelin. And with a spacecraft shield, even a castrated ship can play a role close to the official version of the ship. It is impossible for Chen Ming not to be jealous of such a ship. But Chen Ming does not think that what the pirate said just now is true. Whether this Hammerhead class exists is still unknown. The pirates said they were here to search for the Hammerhead, but they had shut down all the systems of the spacecraft to hide their behavior, so it didn't look like they were doing this. When answering his own questions, he was also praising the Hammerhead, as if he wanted Chen Ming to follow his thoughts and look for the Hammerhead here. Chen Ming would not fall for such a low-level trick. Anyway, he came here just to relieve the boredom and mental fatigue of staying inside the spacecraft for a long time and only being able to do 1 or 2 things. Since the excitement has been found and the space naval battle has been tried, there is no point in staying in the dark cemetery. Look for the cargo holds of the pirates' ships to see if there is anything to collect, and then just leave. Chen Ming controlled the iron ore to fly around the wreckage of the 3 ships for several circles. The cargo hold of the Cerberus floating nearby was found. Except for the appearance that looks a little damaged, the overall structure is very complete. The Cerberus is a merchant ship after all, and the cargo is naturally the most important. It is normal that the cargo hold has the strongest protection. So the cargo hold was completely preserved after the explosion. The traction device quickly locked the cargo hold and fixed it to the side of the spacecraft. Chen Ming directly used the mining laser to cut the cargo hold to prevent anyone from hiding in the cargo hold before the explosion. The modified mining laser cut a hole in the cargo hold almost in the blink of an eye, and the efficiency was very high. It's a pity that if you want to use the mining laser, you must open the side armor of the spacecraft to expose the fragile equipment inside. Otherwise, Chen Ming could also choose to use the mining laser in the previous battle. The power of the modified mining laser is not inferior to some ordinary weapons. But since the iron ore already has an electromagnetic javelin, there's actually no need to do this. Just when some strange thoughts emerged in Chen Ming's mind. The mining laser had split the cargo hold in two. The interior of the cargo hold was exposed. The impact of losing the gravity module and the explosion of the spacecraft caused all the cargo boxes to be scattered in the cargo hold. Many cargo boxes were damaged under the impact, revealing the goods inside, some of which seemed to be wine. Chen Ming used a traction device to tow a cargo box to the side of the spacecraft. You can see that in a corner of the cargo box, there is a cargo order engraved on it, which lists the type and number of the ship transporting this batch of goods. Chen Ming has seen this kind of cargo list on the mining space station, and he is not wrong. These pirates are really disguised as regular freight caravans. Huh. Chen Ming laughed expressionlessly. Since the pirates are dead, he can only accept all the goods as ordered. After confirming that no one is hiding in the cargo hold after it is cut open, Chen Ming controlled the traction device of the spaceship to gradually pull all the cargo boxes to the vicinity of the spaceship and went outside the spaceship in person. He opened the cargo boxes and began to count them according to the cargo list. In addition to wine, the cargo of this caravan also included some cigarettes. There is nothing to say about cigarettes, which are hard currency no matter where they are. Chen Ming paid special attention to the wine because he remembered the brands of these wines. When Chen Ming first came to the mining space station to take office a long time ago, he attended a welcome party with the general manager and other colleagues who took office at the space station at that time. This kind of wine was placed at the banquet. Although Chen Ming did not drink it, he remembered that this kind of wine was still relatively expensive. If he could make a move at the pirate space station, he should be able to make a fortune. After a while, Chen Ming opened most of the scattered cargo boxes. All the goods that were not damaged by the explosion were packed and sent to the iron ore. It just so happens that the iron ore has consumed a lot of materials in the past few months, and the remaining space in the storage cabin can be filled with these. Even if there is no more space, there is still space in the work cabin and the captain's cabin. There is no need to worry about the problem that the Hellhound's cargo hold can hold more things than the iron ore. At this time, there are only 3 cargo boxes floating outside the spacecraft. Chen Ming took a breath and continued to pick up the crowbar to pry open all 3 cargo boxes. But when Chen Ming saw the things in the cargo boxes, his hand movements suddenly stopped. Because the goods in these 3 cargo boxes are not the cigarettes and alcohol written on the cargo list. Instead, they are some injections containing pink liquid placed in transparent low-temperature boxes. The dazzling pink color of these injections made Chen Ming feel a little uncomfortable. However, Chen Ming still endured this inexplicable feeling and found the bill of lading in the corner of the cryogenic box. These pink injections are a stimulant codenamed DP2. Although Chen Ming did not know the meaning of the codename, nor the specific effects of this stimulant. But Chen Ming knew one thing, that is, all stimulants are strictly prohibited in the commodity trade of the human empire. Ordinary people do not need to fight against the mechanical race and Yue at the border like the army, and need to rely on stimulants to maintain concentration and combatability. These stimulants that flow into the market basically have only one use: make people feel the pleasure after using stimulants and become addicted to them. Chen Ming already had a rough answer in his mind about the source and destination of this batch of powder injections. At the same time, he also knew the reason why this caravan, disguised or torn off its disguise as pirates, stayed here, just waiting for the object to trade this batch of pink injections with them. The pirate kept telling Chen Ming that there were good things in the dark cemetery, and it was obvious that he wanted Chen Ming to stay. Wait for their trading partners to come and avenge them, or simply drag others into the water. Chen Ming didn't care what the pirates thought. Anyway, he just planned to clean up the wreckage and leave. Even if these people might have a relationship with the military, Chen Ming was not afraid at all. He didn't plan to return to the prosperous star field through regular channels. His identity as an employee of an abandoned mining space station had doomed him to be unable to get along with the military. Besides, the others didn't know whether their ships were equipped with hyperspace channel systems. After leaving the dark cemetery, where could they find the murderer who had disappeared in this vast universe? After thinking about it, Chen Ming came to the conclusion that his current situation was no different from before. So he didn't waste any more energy on this aspect and continued to confirm the contents of the other 2 cargo boxes. One of the remaining 2 cargo boxes contained normal wine and beverages, and the other was also a low-temperature box like this with pink injections inside. There were about 100 in the 2 low-temperature boxes, and none of them were broken by the previous explosion. Although the profits from powder needles are not at the same level as other things, Chen Ming has no good feelings for this kind of thing, and he doesn't want to dirty his hands. Besides, these powder needles are obviously smuggled from the military, and the difficulty of selling them is different from those cigarettes and alcohol. Once sold, it is very likely to attract military personnel. Chen Ming is now avoiding the military, so how could he take the initiative to do such a thing? The 2 reasons combined made Chen Ming open the lid of the cryogenic box directly in space, allowing the powder needles to be exposed to the absolute low temperature of space. Then he returned to the ship without any nostalgia, holding the last box of wine. Chen Ming controlled the iron ore to turn the ship around, and the stern was aimed at the 2 open cryogenic boxes floating in space. The spacecraft gradually began to accelerate, and the tail flames that erupted burned the cryogenic boxes and the powder needles inside into ashes. Chen Ming finally swept the wreckage of the 3 ships carefully again, confirmed that all valuable things had been moved back to the spacecraft. Then it was time to leave. If I continue to stay here and run into someone who trades with these people, it will not be a good thing. I know nothing about them. If they have a combat power far beyond that of the iron ore, I am afraid I will have to die here. Chen Ming locked the coordinates of the pirate space station on the computer of the spacecraft. After adjusting the position of the hull, the iron ore entered the acceleration phase again. This time, the iron ore will directly reach the destination of Chen Ming's journey, the pirate space station belonging to the human world. Just 5 days after the iron ore left the dark cemetery, an unmarked destroyer jumped out of the hyperspace channel and entered the depths of the dark cemetery very purposefully. The destroyer stayed in the dark cemetery for 3 days and then left here. It didn't bring anything when it came, but when it left, it took away the wreckage of the 3 spaceships that had just been destroyed by Chen Ming. Chen Ming obviously couldn't know about this, but even if he knew it, it didn't matter. He deliberately swept around before leaving, in addition to looking for valuable things. He also found all the electronic equipment in the wreckage of the 3 spacecraft that might store the image data and communication data of the iron ore. Either destroy it on the spot or take it aboard and dismantle it into the most basic materials. All the armor-piercing electromagnetic bullets he fired with the electromagnetic javelin had completely penetrated the spacecraft and could not remain in the wreckage of the spacecraft. If he could still be found, Chen Ming would have nothing to say. Another 2.5 months passed. The iron ore had bypassed the military outpost half a month ago. After a long voyage, the iron ore was about to arrive at the star system where the pirate space station was located. At present, the iron ore has begun to slow down. It is expected that it will be able to slow down to the standard intergalactic navigation speed in 5 days and reach the edge of the pirate space station galaxy at the same time. Although he has known it in advance, Chen Ming still called up the galaxy map on the spacecraft control panel again, intending to deepen his impression of this galaxy again. He may need to stay on the pirate space station for a while, and it is no harm to be familiar with the galaxy where the space station is located. The galaxy where the pirate space station is located is a single star system, and the star is a standard yellow dwarf. It has 2 planets, but neither is a habitable planet. One is close to the star and is a barren rocky planet with extreme temperatures like Venus and Mercury. The other is an ice giant planet similar to Uranus and Neptune, far outside the habitable zone of the galaxy. It looks blue all over and has no star rings. The pirate space station is set up in the circumstellar orbit of the ice giant planet. It is convenient to collect energy materials from the ice giant planet that can supply the space station for a long time. In addition to the stars and planets, there is no other information worth paying attention to in this galaxy. After all, if this galaxy is too good, it would not be the turn of the pirate space station to be set up here. Chen Ming turned off the galaxy map and stretched his body. He planned to relax for the last few days before the spacecraft began to slow down and arrived at the destination. Do nothing, think nothing, empty yourself, and let yourself start the next journey in the best condition. After all, what he will face in the next period of time is the human world, which is more terrible than the natural environment of Raymer. And it is the lowest and most dangerous world of the human world, which belongs to the pirates. 5 days later, the iron ore arrived at the destination galaxy. The appearance of the pirate space station has been revealed on the sensor. Its overall shape is close to a pancake. There are a total of 30 space arms extending from the most central round cake, and most of the buildings are distributed on these space arms. On the outside of the space arms are a large number of large-area solar panels, which maximize the utilization rate of the space station's external space. As the spaceship approached, Chen Ming could see through the porthole in the captain's room that a ship's guidance signal light was on a space arm. After discovering Chen Ming's ship approaching, it began to flash, guiding him into the space station. Following the guidance of the guidance signal light, the iron ore slowly entered the dock of the space station. After entering the dock of the pirate space station, the first thing Chen Ming saw was the different sizes of ship positions that occupied the entire space arm. The ratio of frigate and destroyer positions is about 100 to 1. There are only 2 cruiser-level docks, and there is no battleship dock at all. About 1/5 of these positions have spaceships in them. It can be seen that the flow of people in this pirate space station is still very high. Chen Ming controlled the iron ore and stopped at a frigate ship berth following the guidance of the signal. I wanted to see if anyone would contact me through the communication channel. But no one contacted, no one checked, and no one cared about Chen Ming's boat that he had never seen before. The space station seemed to be only responsible for guiding the spaceships outside through signals, and there was no follow-up. This is the pirate space station. In Chen Ming's memory, although he had not actually been to the pirate space station, he had learned about it through other channels. The difference between the pirate space station and the highly professional small space station, such as the mining space station. The main function is similar to those of large central space stations, and it plays a role similar to that of a settlement. Although the overall volume is smaller than that of a large central space station, it is much larger than a mining space station anyway, and it generally has all the functions it should have. It's just that Chen Ming never expected that the management of a settlement where people live for a long time would be so loose. But Chen Ming didn't dwell on this. Anyway, just look at the peacefulness of the dock. At least it looks peaceful, which shows that there is still the necessary management. The loose management of the space station now is also good for me, so there is no need to care. Chen Ming looked out the porthole. There are many spaceships taking off and landing in the entire dock. There is a spaceship docked at the nearby berth. Chen Ming can see that the people on it are wearing ordinary protective clothing and walked down without wearing helmets. Through the horizontal elevator on the dock channel, he quickly went to one end of the dock. A door leading to the core area inside the space station. There was a huge one written on the top of the gate, which might mean that the space arm where the dock was located was the number 1 space arm. Just as Chen Ming was observing the behavior of others, the terminal in his hand suddenly detected a network that could be accessed. Chen Ming thought about it and used the doctor's terminal to access it. Then a map of the open areas of the space station was sent to the terminal, waiting for Chen Ming to receive it, and the signature was the Space Station Administration. Chen Ming's first reaction when he received this document was not to open it to see the space station map. Instead, he wanted to switch to his own terminal to see if his savings card was blocked. However, Chen Ming still restrained himself. If someone checked his savings card record this time, there would definitely be a big problem. Instead of checking such dangerous things that cannot be used, it is better to check something else. Chen Ming operated on the terminal and opened a search website that was still commonly used 30 years ago. Fortunately, this company has not closed down and seems to be doing well. Chen Ming can use this search website to search for news that interests him. So Chen Ming immediately searched for the situation of the galaxy where Reimu was located. A public information immediately appeared at the top of the search. It said that there was an unknown danger in this galaxy, which was blocked by the military. The notice asked passing ships to detour and prohibited jumping out of the hyperspace channel of this galaxy. The source of this information was 32 years ago, when the insect plague broke out in the space station. However, 32 years have passed, and except for the announcement that the galaxy was blocked, the military has not given any other news. It seems that the blockade will continue. When he found that the military had not issued an announcement to lift the blockade, a question came to Chen Ming's mind. How did he escape from the military blockade? A civilian ship flew out of the galaxy in a swagger without being stopped by anyone. Is this normal? Didn't the military find him? Or did they find him but didn't care? Chen Ming felt that it was impossible to be the latter. He was just an inconspicuous maintenance technician with no background or connections. He couldn't even make a splash if he was killed. Without knowing for sure whether he would reveal the current situation of the space station, they had no reason to let him go. So the real situation should be the former. But this shouldn't be the case. Chen Ming knows the effect of military technology best. After all, many of their equipment were purchased through bidding from outside companies. Naturally, many of Shinda's cutting-edge detection equipment were also bought by the military. Although Chen Ming is not engaged in such things, he is still very clear about the specific effects. In just one galaxy, there is no reason for the military to miss such a large mining civilian ship. Not to mention that Chen Ming has been using the iron ore at high intensity, repeatedly entering and exiting the atmosphere of Ramu. How come he didn't find out? Chen Ming thought about it for a long time and couldn't figure it out. He always felt that there was still some key information missing to figure out the reason behind it. He could only put this question in his heart for the time being. At least it's not bad news that the military didn't find him for the time being. Chen Ming continued to search for the situation of the mining space station, trying to search through the exclusive number of each public space station in the Empire. But the space station is different from the galaxy, and Chen Ming did not find any news related to the space station. It's just like the mining space station where he works and the pirate space station where he is now. Chen Ming frowned and searched for the Cinda company he belongs to. The first item in the search result is the homepage of the Cinda company, which means that Cinda is still alive and well and has not been affected by the destruction of the space station at all. The star system that cannot be erased is still there, and the huge company that cannot collapse easily is still there, but the space station belonging to the star system has completely disappeared. Chen Ming recorded the results of the search firmly in his heart and strengthened his determination not to be dragged into the mining space station. That was about it, and Chen Ming did not continue searching. Anyway, he had already planned to give up his past identity and did not want to get involved in things related to the company, the military, and the space station, so knowing these general things was enough. Chen Ming sighed, put down the terminal, put on his protective suit, and stood at the door of the cabin. At this moment, Xiao Shi suddenly rushed out from the captain's room and climbed onto Chen Ming's shoulders. Holding Chen Ming's helmet, he looked at it eagerly. Chen Ming remembered that Xiao Shi was sleeping in the ore where he had dug a pit just now. It should have rushed into the captain's room when he was not paying attention and saw the novel space station outside, so he wanted to go out with him. I really can't do anything with you. Chen Ming took off his protective suit helmet and stuffed Xiao Shi into the protective suit. He activated the sunshade function of the helmet and confirmed that his face and the small stone that shared the same helmet with him could not be seen from outside. Chen Ming also confirmed that the company's exclusive logo on the 2 terminals he carried with him had been erased. Then he opened the hatch and walked off the spacecraft. Standing in the empty dock, Chen Ming turned his head and looked at the iron ore behind him. It was completely different from the shabby look when he first controlled it. The iron ore now looked like a brand new ship, bright white, with thick hull armor and looked extremely solid. Each side was equipped with a machine gun that had obviously undergone a lot of modifications, which also showed the careful care of the ship by the owner of the spacecraft. This was done by Chen Ming before entering the port, changing the ship's weapons from electromagnetic javelins back to the original machine guns. After all, the mechanical race is not uncommon in the marginal star field, and there are always people who can see that the weapons on the spacecraft are the weapons of the mechanical race, and then associate them with the large amount of white cloud steel on the mechanical race. Don't show your wealth to others. Chen Ming doesn't want to cause trouble because of this. Standing there, he admired his achievements over the past 6 months. Chen Ming's face unconsciously showed a satisfied look. This ship is not only a reflection of his own ability and technology. It also accompanied Xiaoshi to cross the half-light-year journey, arrived at the pirate space station, and completed his goal. From the moment he stepped off the spaceship, Chen Ming's previous plan has been completed. From the dangerous abandoned mining space station, he came to the space station belonging to the human world. Although this space station has some problems and is not on the official list of the human empire. But at least there are people here, that's enough. For Chen Ming now, it's time to start thinking about his next plan. The marginal star field where he is currently located is poorer than the prosperous star field inside the human empire. Poverty means fewer people and low development. Although because of the mechanical race, Yue and the ruins of the destroyed civilization, there are actually not few opportunities. But these opportunities are accompanied by danger. Chen Ming is not a professional fighter, technology is what he is good at. He wants to go to a more core position in the human empire, which should be more suitable for him. Chen Ming's skills, talents, and abilities can only be fully utilized in places with people and cutting-edge technology. Maybe he can start a company by himself? Help people repair spaceships? Chen Ming smiled and shook his head slightly. His abilities are definitely not limited to this. However, Chen Ming has no definite idea of what to do. Take it one step at a time and find a way to get to the prosperous star field. When he sees what the prosperous star field is like with his own eyes, he will naturally understand what he should do. In order to achieve such a goal, Chen Ming still has a lot to do. First and foremost, it is naturally to get a formal identity. But this definitely requires some special ways and the money needed to do everything. Chen Ming has just arrived here, he doesn't know anyone, he has no ways, and he doesn't know if there is any money left in the card. Even if there is any money left, he can't use it. It is basically equivalent to being penniless. But there are far more places to use money than here. Chen Ming will have to install a hyperspace navigation system for the spacecraft, which will definitely cost money. He can't fly back slowly, otherwise he may not have flown through a few star systems until he dies of old age. Even if these two are done, the supplies needed to buy the spacecraft will also cost money. Everything costs money, so he can only find a way to make money. Chen Ming thinks he is not a good person. He has no psychological burden for the pirates who troubled him like before, and he ate other people's goods in return. But he can't do active pirate behavior. If he only relies on normal means of making money, Chen Ming has already had several ideas. Chen Ming stood on the horizontal elevator of the dock. While watching the scene around him moving quickly, he considered the feasibility of several of his ideas. The most important of these ideas is naturally to find a way to sell the 2 high-grade metals he got on Ruemu's star and the batch of cigarettes and alcohol. Bayun steel and sky steel are still somewhat useful to him, but Chen Ming doesn't need those cigarettes and alcohol at all. However, this idea is a one-time one and can only make a quick buck. If selling things doesn't make enough, Chen Ming will have to continue to find other ways to make money. So Chen Ming had a second idea. Just at this time, the elevator sent Chen Ming through the gate and left the dock. Came to a repair shop where the dock and the core area of the space station are connected. Chen Ming walked down the elevator and saw a large number of ship equipment placed in various places in the repair shop. Many people were selecting different ship parts, preparing for their future journey, whether they were going to rob or just go on a simple journey. Chen Ming's second idea was to find a way to become a member of the space station repair shop. Although the pirate space station is nominally owned by pirates, it is definitely funded by a certain force behind it. A repair shop that can be opened next to the dock of the space station must be personally opened by the forces that sponsor the space station. It is definitely more stable and safer than any other job in the space station. I just don't know if they have plans to recruit people now. Chen Ming looked around for a few times and didn't find any management personnel of the repair shop nearby, and even didn't see a few repairmen. I don't know what the situation is. But one thing is certain, that is, there are so many spaceships taking off and landing in the dock every moment. There are definitely quite a few spaceships that need to repair damaged armor and weapons in the space station and buy supplies and ammunition needed by the spaceships. The money that the repair shop can earn is definitely not a small amount. And because of the pirate space station itself, some good repairmen will definitely not be willing to come to such a remote and dangerous place on their own initiative. The overall level of the technicians who can work here in the space station is probably neither high nor low. With their own abilities, as long as they can find a way to get in, they can make a little money anyway. Of course, the latter is just Chen Ming's guess. If the pirate space station really has enough skilled repairmen, there is no need for new people to join. Then Chen Ming could only choose other ways. His eyes looked at the gate of the repair factory leading to the core area of the space station. The pirate space station is not just a dock and a repair factory. He could try to find a place in the space station to sell weapons. The spaceship is blocked by the repair factory of the space station itself, but the weapons can't be monopolized by the space station, right? Find a weapons store and rely on his own skills in modifying weapons. Chen Ming can still make a living. Even if it doesn't work, Chen Ming still has a last choice. Drive the iron or ship to be a miner. Of course, this is the most last resort, and Chen Ming will not do this until the last minute. Before there is no other opportunity, Chen Ming still plans to try a better option. In short, follow the plan step by step. Since he can't even see the people in the repair factory now, he might as well go out to the space station to take a look and convert the resources he has on hand into usable money. With money in hand, he will have peace of mind.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.